Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park. And today we're on our second read of The Mythology Class by Arnold Are. And this is a graphic novel that we're currently reading through. As I'm reading this, I'm starting to notice that the graphic novels, at least I've read, have felt more like movies. And what
Hmm.
I mean by that is the story seems to wrap up in a way that has a beginning, middle, and end, and it's all compiled within, I guess, a tale. Like even something that's longer, like the Walking Dead anthology, there's a large amount of it, but it seems to have much more closure within the stories that they're telling.
For sure.
Whereas like mangas or manhwas or comics, those seem to be more stretched out versions, which are seemingly what I think of as television, like TV show series or Netflix series or things like that.
Totally. So it seems like graphic novels have a very clear arc,
Mm-hmm.
while manhwa, manga, and comics are not necessarily elongated arcs, but arcs that are tinier.
Right, like when I think of a story like Naruto, it's many different villains that are peaked as the main form of content for a while. And
Mm,
then when that character is defeated, then it goes into that next arc of this new character that they need to defeat or that. And I mean, Demon Slayer, all these things have a story that's focalized around a certain villain.
for sure.
Whereas when we think of this story, or when we think of even something like I Was Their American Dream, which was our first read, it's a
Yes.
story that has one seemingly focal point that's the overall guideline for what's happening in that graphic novel.
Totally.
So, along those lines, I mean, firstly, do you prefer to read manga, manhwa, graphic novels? Like, which way would you go in terms of like a comic or the graphic novel type of story?
Definitely. I tend to gravitate towards manga, manhwa, and comics
Hmm.
because I feel like the little bits of story that comes from one book or one part of the series, it feels as though I'm getting many stories, even though it's one whole story.
Mm. And you get the same characters that you can fall in love with and proceed with.
Yes, and then you can see the complexities of each character. Like they're not flat or they're not married to one set of characteristics. You see their dark side, you see their light side, you see what makes them tick and what motivates them.
On that note, do you prefer TVs or do you prefer movies?
So I'm very different when it comes to visual media. I am more of a movie person,
Mm. See, I am exactly the opposite. I think I prefer graphic novels because I like my stories to be wrapped up a little bit more.
for sure.
But when it comes to something that I'm watching, and I consider like K-dramas or limited TV series that Netflix is doing a little bit more of, or Hulu, like all those streaming sites are doing now, I consider that more on the movie side because it is one story arc that they're trying to complete.
That's very shortened.
Exactly. But for me, I prefer TV shows because exactly like you said for the mangas or the manhwas,
Hmm.
it's a story that contains the character that you can see grow, develop, and just become even a different person by the end of it.
Absolutely.
Like I know you haven't seen the Breaking Bad series,
Mm.
but one of my favorite things about that TV show is how the main character, Walter White, develops from this professor that I think he's not even a professor. I think he's just like a high school teacher, high school chemistry teacher. And he turns into this like major drug lord, and then
Mm-hmm.
seeing that development of how his brain starts ticking differently. So I think I like the TV for that specific content.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for some reason, I think graphic novels I like as a book that has a very tied up kind of storyline, I think.
For sure. I think we've talked about this outside of the podcast, how you prefer movies over books. Like if
Hmm.
we both were to choose to only read for the rest of our life or to only watch movies and TV
Hmm.
shows for the rest of their life, you chose watching and I chose reading. And I
Hmm.
think that's why I choose mangas and comics and
Mm.
manhwas because I would rather keep on reading and having that continuous series keep going for me is like
Mm.
reading forever.
That's true. And for me, I can sit and watch TV for hours if I let myself.
Mm,
One of my safety nets or comforts is being able to turn on a show I've watched a million times
mhm.
It's old shows like Friends, Cheers, Frasier, things that people probably nowadays may not have seen, like the
Right.
Gen Z, or I don't know what the next one. What are the next people called?
Mm,
The alphas or something?
yeah,
I don't know.
I
The
think
beta fish.
the alpha generation, I think, is what they're called, but I'm not sure.
But yeah, I love watching those old shows that just take me to a comfort spot where my brain
Mm,
can kind of go into just, it feels like my brain's relaxing in a pool of dopamine.
there you
But
go.
but currently we are reading a graphic novel,
Mm-hmm.
and we will get more into the story right after our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Archipelago Books. They are distributors of Filipino and Filipino American works outside the Philippines. You can visit their storefront in San Francisco, California, or you can shop online at archipelagobooks.com. Learn more about their works through their website and on Instagram at Archipelago Books. Archipelago, ARKIPELAGO Books.
Yeah, check them out. And although you may not be able to find this book, The Mythology Class, currently on their website, Arnold Ada does have another book on there that's called The Children of Bethala. So make sure to check that out and order from them and support a BIPOC business. And that's going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay, so second read of The Mythology Class by Arnold Ada. Now, what have we read so far?
So far, we had our character introductions of the gods, of our main character Nicole, the class, the teacher Mrs. Encanta, and her assistants. We've also seen how the class was summoned by the same dream, and though they were skeptical at first, they eventually felt convinced to join in capturing Encantos together.
Right. And this week we have read pages 114 through 226, and we get a lot more details in the story. It's moving on. We're being able to see what this class has done, and they're seemingly coming to the end of their exploration, or so they thought.
Mm-hmm. They have been exploring not only the Encantos and the world of the Encantos, but
Mhm.
they've also been exploring their HQ, which is called the Krusna Ligas,
Right.
which we are loosely translating as cross leagues.
Right. And, trying to do some amount of research. We're not the most proficient at understanding everything,
Mm-hmm.
but I did find that there was a place actually named Krusnalagas in the Philippines, right? It's based off of Google, of my very thorough research.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's an actual tree that is shaped like a cross,
Mm-hmm.
which is maybe where this spans from.
For
But
sure.
it would go along the lines of how thoughtful Arnold Ada is in putting in real life images or real life places.
For sure.
Kind of like the gods are very real to the story of the Philippines. And I would assume, and having seen other places that they list within the graphic novel,
Mm-hmm.
I do see that the other places are real places inside the Philippines.
Yes.
So me not having traveled to the Philippines or knowing very much about the actual expanse of all the lands,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to assume that this is an actual place that exists there.
Totally. And within the story, Krishna Ligas has these different chambers and places, more chambers and places than even I thought there would be.
Hmm.
For example, in this read, we learn about an enchanted forest that has these fruits that grants different powers. For example, a power of sincerity or the power of learning what you need to study more. Or one fruit that was really funny was the fruit of confidence,
Hmm.
where it makes you say the thing you're afraid to say.
Hmm.
And like these two characters, I forgot who they were, but one was saying that they love the other person, and the other person saying that they bite their toenails.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and although they do get these abilities once they eat the fruit, it does seem like this is all temporary.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like something that you're granted for a short time being.
Right.
There was also a part in there, though, that our main character, Nicole, bit into a fruit,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the fruit of learning, but she said she didn't feel anything. And I
Right.
wasn't sure if that was just a joke or just meant how powerful she was in her actual learning abilities.
I think she's just really powerful, but I do remember Lane being like, show off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So there is another big moment that we get out of Cruz Nalagas.
Yes, and it's in the same night where they go on a boat ride through the sky,
Mm-hmm.
like very Fantasia like.
Mm-hmm.
to the oldest tree in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And here, while they're on the boat ride, Gio and Nicole are in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this cute reveal where Gio shares his feelings to Nicole, though Nicole doesn't share them back
Right.
because she is thinking of Kubin.
Right. She has her heart and her eyes set on Coopin.
Yes.
But I wonder if this boat ride to this tree was maybe the tree that is the Cruz Nalegas. That's the location that the story is set at.
For sure.
Yeah. But this is kind of the lighthearted moment that we get, breaking up the amounts of tension that we have gotten
Totally.
and the amount of tension that we are gonna get pretty much following right after this.
Mm-hmm. So, following right after this, we are thrown into more captures of encantos and very descriptive captures of encantos, revealing the students' individual strengths.
Right, and it seems like the kids are getting really good at this.
Mm-hmm.
They are cruising by, they seem to be getting into this bit of confidence and almost cockiness with how
Right.
easy this stuff is getting.
Right. Besides Lane forgetting the jars all the time.
Right, that's her superpower.
I guess that's her superpower.
Yeah.
One of the more descriptive captures is when they capture the wild tikbalang.
Right, because it ends up being one of the hardest captures. And I think there was even a scene with Nicole where she was dreading this capture, like she
Yeah.
knew that something was going to go wrong.
Right. And the reason why the tikbalang is the most difficult is because one, not only is this tikbalang wild,
Hmm.
but two, it's during a night where there's a concert and it's in that area and they're trying to do their best to keep as discreet as possible
Hmm.
while still luring this huge monster.
Right. And if you've seen any Fast and Furious movies, you know that that's not going to be the case.
Right.
So we know that the Tikbalang is a horse human type creature.
Mm-hmm.
And even based off of the character that we met before that guards the temple for them,
Lucio, yes.
yeah, we know that this character is really strong and it's one of the more powerful mythological creatures that is in this world, at least.
Yes, definitely. And you can see its power and its speed in the splash page where the raging beast is chasing Lisa and Bob.
Maybe. But I do know Lisa because she's super cool. She rides a motorcycle.
Yes.
She always seems kind of chill and laid back. But at this point in time, she is freaking out. This is also one of the moments that we see Arnold Are include Tagalog within the story
Yeah.
so seamlessly.
Yes.
As someone that does not speak or read Tagalog,
Mm-hmm.
I had to utilize different resources for figuring this out, which we'll kind of get to at the end of our podcast. But yeah, like you said, we see through these splash pages of Lisa and other person being chased on this
Yes.
motorcycle by the Tikbalang as the other students are also preparing to capture it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the madness of the stuff that they thought would work, the machinery that they had invented for this, all kind of being shot down. They just weren't what they thought they were.
Right. And it wasn't until Nicole jumped onto the creature, I believe.
Wasn't it Kubin that jumped on first and then Nicole jumped on afterwards because Kubin had jumped on?
Right. And then that's how they were able to tame the beast.
Right. If you want a better description of it, just read the book. It's
Yes.
going to be much better than the story that we tell.
Just know that it is a very fast chase scene, goes by really quickly, and then all of a sudden, a tamed beast.
Yeah. I thought the scenes with the Tikbalang were actually long. It seemed like a big part of this current read that we have.
It was long, but it went by so quickly
True.
for me.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I didn't realize how many pages I've gone through until the taming.
Right, right, right.
So, after the tikbalang, they believe that they're done.
Right.
And they close out with a celebration because they're not supposed to have any more encantos in this era.
Yeah, not even just a celebration, but kind of goodbyes.
Yeah.
They're preparing for the teachers that have come and Mrs. Encanta to be leaving them soon so that they could go
Right.
to the next timeline where these Encantos are stuck.
Right. And specifically, we see a moment with Kubin and Nicole, how they're feeling really sad that they're parting soon, and there's some lovey-dovey moments.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think which is really well done. And the class decides that besides this celebration, their last goodbye or their despedida is going to be taking Mrs. Encanto's assistants on an outing, pasyal pasyal in Tagalog, to the Plaza of the Gods,
Okay,
which,
hold on. You
okay,
said two Tagalog words.
uh-huh,
You described outing as special,
uh-huh.
and the other one you said was
Despedida, which is like a goodbye party or a parting farewell.
right, right, right. So as everyone's getting together and, celebrating both the good times and the expectation that everyone else is leaving, there is one person that isn't quite as excited or, I guess, comfortable with the moment.
Mm-hmm. Tala, who isn't celebrating with everyone, is overwhelmed by all the bad news that is happening in the area,
Right.
specifically in Manila.
Right.
So she disappears into a body of water to, I guess, hide and to recenter herself.
Right. And Tala is one of the ghosts, the original ghost that gathered everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
And to go into a little bit more detail, what we see in the scenes are her seeing new stories of what's happening in the real world.
Yes.
So it's not these extravagant events that are happening from Encantos. It's coming from what maybe a reference to what humans are doing to each other in the modern day, how we're constantly hurting each other.
Right.
So I think this is Arnold Ada's way of putting this realization within a mythological book.
Mm-hmm. That the gods are not only focusing on saving the human race, but also like noticing what the humans are doing to each other.
Right, or even just showing the ridiculousness of them capturing crazy mythical creatures that can be dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
and yet the thing that could bum out this teacher or this mythological creature, Tala, is what we are actually doing to ourselves.
Right, exactly.
But we, as ourselves, aren't the only danger within this story. We
Mm-hmm.
still have this underlying looming character base of the aswang.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the aswang are headquartered in the Plaza of the Gods, which is where the class is going to.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there are students and the assistants who are already at the mall who get captured there, like Sulaiman, Misha, Angie, Edward, Sam, Ray, and Gio.
Yeah, and so the aswang are now gathered and they're still under the curse where they're dogs during the daytime, but
Yeah.
during the nighttime is when they undergo their transformations, which then leads them to carry out the evil deeds that they're planning to do, which one of the biggest ones is to capture sacrifices for Satan or
Yes.
Satan or the thing that they worship.
Right, exactly. And because they're dogs in the daytime, one of them follows Nicole back
R-
home.
Right, kind of. So one of them appears as Nicole and Kuben are having one of their moments, and Nicole picks up this dog and is like, "Oh, what a cute, fluffy little white dog," because it kind
Yeah.
of looks like a maybe a small Scottish Terrier kind of thing.
Right, yes.
And so she's like, "Oh, I'll take this dog home." Which, firstly, I mean, don't just take a dog home. It could be microchipped. It could already be housed somewhere. I know the Philippines are different,
Exactly.
but I'm just saying, like, yeah, there probably isn't microchipping in the Philippines quite as much or quite as heavily.
Not not that I know of, no. And if there's no collar, usually it doesn't have an owner. And I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure this aswang was not wearing a collar.
Yeah, but also, dogs could lose their. I'm just saying, like, the thought process of just picking up a dog and being like, all right, you're coming home with me seems a lot. Seems like something you should maybe not do. Or maybe just something that I wouldn't do.
That's fair. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Kuben and Nicole were in a very isolated place where not a lot of people lived.
Hmm.
So I think that might have been the thought process. Like, if this dog is out in the wilderness with no one around, I'm pretty sure this dog is abandoned.
Oh yeah, I mean that for sure, which is where I was going,
Mm-hmm.
but also from the standpoint of having a wild dog inside your house so that it can pee and like just possibly destroy your things
Mhm.
seems like a lot. Like she didn't set up an area, she didn't set up a room. She was just like, "All right, come into my house and do what you will."
We also don't know if Nicole didn't set up an area or room for this dog. We just needed the important parts of the story to
I guess
happen.
so. Nothing was prepared. Anyways, so she brings this dog home, and it's not just the dog. Obviously, it isn't a swan, and its entire plan was to become a sort of spy, or no, I
Yes.
guess it was more than just a spy. It was trying to break into Nicole's home so that
Mhm.
it could kidnap her.
Right, exactly. Thankfully, though, Cuban and Lucio made it in time to help save her.
Yeah, kind of thankfully. Go on.
So they get there before that aswang was able to harm Nicole, but they still run into danger by tracking another aswang that isn't at the mall yet.
Yes. And this is where it's a little bit less, thankfully,
Right.
because Kubin ends up getting into a fight with the lead Aswang,
Yeah.
and Kubin's able to take the Aswang down. He is able to use his skills as a
Mhm.
warrior and a fighter to actually not capture, but get the Aswang to the point that he could defeat it. But with
Unfortunately.
right, with modern technology that the Aswang have found, the Aswang picks out a gun and just shoots Kubin right in the middle of the chest.
Yeah.
And our assumption at this point is that he's passed away.
Yeah. And then after that, they capture Nicole, go into a helicopter to fly towards the Plaza of the Gods while she's kicking and screaming and just not processing or trying to process what's happened in front of her eyes. The Aswang eventually had it with her and throw her off the helicopter.
Right. And this, we didn't do a content warning in the beginning, but there's almost a slight content warning because the Aswang are trying to assault her in a
Mm-hmm.
seemingly sexual manner, is what
Right.
the assumption is from what they're saying. So that's the reason why she even goes into more of a kicking and screaming self-defense mode.
Right.
And yeah, they throw her out of the plane because their thought is it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm. And while she's falling, I feel like Arnold Ara did such a beautiful job of going between her falling while her also remembering a scene when she's talking to her Lolo
Right, right, right.
about how her Lolo was dying and how he's saying that you need to be the one to believe in these stories that I've told you already because now you have it. Now
Right.
you are able to carry it forward.
Right. And as she's thinking about these stories, as her life is seemingly flashing before her eyes, that is when she falls onto these massive pair of hands.
Mhm.
And as she looks up, it's Bethala. It's
Yes.
the god saving her.
Yes, exactly. So Nicole is saved. Kubin is not. The other students are not. Another set of students are also in trouble where when the Aswang show up at HQ or Krishna Ligas.
Hmm.
They almost capture Bob, Eileen, and Lane, but Gina shows up just in time to save them.
Right. Well, they capture Bob, Eiley, and Lane, and Gina is behind the wall this whole time. She
Mm,
is distancing herself out because of the extra information that she has.
from Nuno.
Right. And that ends up coming in handy and in a very lucky way because as the Aswang are capturing the other three of her classmates, Gina can now come back and fight and save them and seemingly turn this whole thing around
Yes.
so that she can save the other classmates as well.
Yes. So, although Bob, Eileen, Lane, and Gina are safe, unfortunately, one of the Aswangs got to Mrs. Encanta
Mm-hmm.
after she found the letter from Lamang.
Mm-hmm.
So, Gina thinks to bring Mrs. Encanta back home and to get help from Nuno.
Right. This is where I think it's that sticking point for Gina. Because
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning of the story, when we were finding out everyone's powers, we went through each individual classmate until we got to Gina, and the explanation was that they don't know what her power is yet, but they do know that she has a big choice to make in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that choice is yet, still, as we have finished this part of the read,
Right.
because the choices that she's made so far is initially to help out Nuno. This was in the
Mm-hmm.
past read.
Yes.
Then she's decided to leave Nuno and kind of tell him to screw off, like
Right.
stop bothering me.
Right.
And now she's coming back to Nuno. She's tied him up. She's captured him. And this is the end of our read. She is going through the point of asking Nuno for help
Mm-hmm.
and saying, I need you. Please help me.
Yes.
She has those three items that Lamang has left for the class.
Yes.
And hopefully, this is where the story turns for the class to maybe be able to defeat the aswang.
Yes, hopefully.
But we don't know because this is the end of our read.
Right, exactly. Thinking about this read, how quickly did you get through it?
So quickly.
For real.
This book, I think just in general, is so easy to read through. The very beginning, there was a lot more storytelling, so it was a little bit longer because there was actual words to be read.
Mm-hmm.
Within this section, especially the chase with the tikbalang, I thought the way that it was much more based on the visual aspects and it
Mm-hmm.
was so pretty, but it also meant that I could flow through it a little bit easier.
Absolutely. And if I could have, I would have read it all in one go.
Hmm.
If it wasn't for life things, but yes, absolutely. The flow was so easy that it didn't feel like it was 100 pages. It
Hmm.
felt like it was only a few.
Hmm. Hmm. And I do have to say, for me, as someone that's not a Tagalog speaker or reader, this is where I got stuck on the parts that Bob was speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in a negative way, but I definitely had to put more effort into reading it.
For sure.
So I tried out like this Google Lens or something. It's
Oh,
something that you can use on your camera so that it translates words that it sees,
yeah.
which sounded so cool. I was so excited to see it because I was like, oh, I could just read this book by looking through my phone.
Yeah.
But the translations weren't right. Like they weren't helpful in the way that it
Mm,
helped me actually get through the story.
I
So
see.
then I had to go back and I had a computer ready so that I could just translate as I went. But I can definitely say that was the part that made it harder for me to get through.
Fair.
But once again, it's understandable because it's the characters in the story. I think the only thing that maybe I would have hoped for as someone that's not a Tagalog speaker or reader is that there is an area somewhere, maybe at the bottom of the page, somewhere where I can see the translation rather than having to go outside of the book because it takes you out of the story when you're going to a website and pulling back in. So something that ideally is a resource within the story that I could refer to.
Fair. I appreciate that Arnold Ara doesn't put
Mhm,
translations, just like how we talk about in prose books where ube is translated or paalam is
mhm.
translated. I would rather there be no translation. And yes, it is an interruption to the book, but it feels more fluid when there is no additional translation. And I know that it's a comic, so it's easier to maybe put a translation, but I appreciate that one isn't
Well,
there.
I think for that case, like I said, the fluidity is broken up for me as someone that has to get out of the book and go back into it.
Mhm.
But I do appreciate that he keeps the language so that people have to learn it. I mean, the whole
Mm-hmm.
point of this book is to learn about Philippine mythology.
Yes.
So within Philippine mythology, it would be kind of senseless to not include Tagalog as the main language and have that be in there. I just wish there was a part in the book that I could flip to much more quickly so that I could still look at the scenes as they're moving because we're in this massive chase scene and
Mm,
then out of that chasing have to go flip back
I
and a
get
flip
that.
back. So maybe even not putting the Tagalog as the chase scene, but putting it in a part where they're having more conversations, because then I can get in and out of it much more easily.
Mm,
But in my brain, I'm like watching this movie, and it's like someone next to me watching it that pauses it to say like, "Oh, I have to go to the bathroom." And it's like, come on, like every single time, every 2 minutes. So I think as a person that doesn't speak the language, that's the part that was harder for me. But it's not saying that I don't appreciate that he put it in there or that I don't think it belongs in there. It just was harder for me to follow those pages.
that's fair. Considering that this portion of the book went by so quickly, there are a lot of jump scenes that happen. Was it difficult for you to follow those jump scenes through the storyline this time around?
No, because the way that Arnold Ada draws it is much more fine line when he goes to past timelines
Mm-hmm.
versus what he currently presents is much darker and much more, I guess, bolded,
Yes.
not font, but drawings.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate that it's so clearly set apart from each other.
Hmm.
And even though the jump scenes happen even more often than in the first part,
Hmm.
I think that the storytelling is what made it keep going really quickly.
Yeah. Now, out of everything, are there any scenes that stood out to you prominently?
I think the chase scene with the Tikbalang was the most prominent. The fact that the Tikbalang had so much emphasis that we saw that Lucio used to be this Tikbalang,
Mm-hmm.
used to be this wild, used to be this fierce and strong.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that this fierceness and strength is still within Lucio, it highlights the difference between wild and tame.
So, along those notes, let's go into some predictions. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think Lucio's going to come back to play a key part in this?
Think so. I think the fact that Lucio hasn't been particularly spotlighted besides being introduced has to do with his role later on.
Do you not remember the scenes where he balled up all the little kids? He like took them to school on the basketball court. How about with Kubin? So Kubin has passed away.
Mhm.
Do you think Kubin makes another appearance either as an ethereal being or as, I don't know, somehow coming back to life?
I don't think Kubin comes back to life. I don't think he's that type of god. I think he is more of a mortal being because he is a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he'll come back as a flashback or maybe come back in a dream for Nicole,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think he's gonna come back as an actual entity.
Okay. Last question then. How many more good guys become unalived?
Oh no. I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed. I'm hoping that none of the students are unalived.
And that's your guess for how many you think are gonna be unalived?
My guess is I feel like maybe Sulaiman is also gonna be unalived.
Like one of the teachers?
Yeah.
Okay. But we won't know until we get into our next read, and that next read is going to be our third and last read, which are pages 227 through 338.
Yes.
Now, for anyone that is also enjoying this book as much as we are, if you've had certain pages that you thought stood out, like for me, it was the aswang page in that first read that still I can picture it so vividly of how they popped out and they emerged. But if you have anything that you really like from the story and you want to share it with us, how can people reach out to us?
Y'all can email us at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com or you can join the conversation on Instagram at Asian Book Club Pod.
Yep. And we also have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, that has our books that we've read in the past, books that we plan to read, and books that we recommend.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat! Bye!
Bye.